بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity for us to continue our lessons in the introduction of the knowledge of Mantiq. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with the understanding, tawfiq and hidayah, that we are able to understand the subject, and may Allah make this lesson a blessed one for our sins and forgiven our prayers and answered inshallah ta'ala. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. So this is our second lesson in entering into introduction and the Mantiq. Before inshallah ta'ala we enter into our kitab, that is the kitab of As-Sullam Al-Munawwaraq. So in our last lesson, that is 2 weeks ago, we were speaking about Mabadi Ashara. Then we are speaking about what is called as the 10 principles by Al-Imam Al-Sabban. So we mentioned a few things, and one of the things that we mentioned is the definition of the knowledge of Al-Mantiq. So what we covered is, and this is one of the important things in the 10 principles. So as I mentioned, there are basically two definitions. Definition number one is what you see in the screen: علم يبحث فيه عن المعلومات تصورية والتصديقية من حيث إنها توصل إلى مجهول تصور أو تصديقي. So basically it speaks about knowledge based on apprehension, that is the tasawwur, and tasdiq. So we have apprehension and we have affirmation. These are the basic components of the knowledge of Mantiq. So it is about understanding tasawwur and understanding tasdiq. So last week I gave an example of tasawwur, and I gave an example of tasdiq. Inshallah later on I will give some more examples. Then we spoke about the second definition. The second definition, and this is usually the definition that you see our ulama in books of Mantiq, and they speak about this definition. And this is definition that is based on is samara, that is the virtue, or we say the benefits of the knowledge of Mantiq. Earlier it is the components of the knowledge of Mantiq. The second definition speaks about the outcome. So it says alatun qanuniyatun ta'simu mura'atuha al-dhihna, it is the tools or set of principles that protect the mind from entering into fault in thinking, or from bad reasoning. So this is the second definition of knowledge of Al-Mantiq. And then we spoke about the mawdu' in greater detail, and the mawdu' of the knowledge of Mantiq. It is basically tasawwur and tasdiq. Tasawwur and tasdiq. So last week I mentioned under tasawwur we have the mabadi and we have the maqasid. With the mabadi and basically the foundations, and the foundations of the chapter of tasawwur or apprehension, it is al-kulliyatul khams, the 5 universal concepts, and we have the ta'rifat, that is the definition. So this is the mabadi and maqasid, the principles or the objectives of the chapter of tasawwur. As for the tasdiq, the mabadi, and it is al-qadaya, it is propositions, and then the maqasid, and it is al-qiyas, syllogism. The reason why we study propositions, it will lead us into understanding syllogism in qiyas. I believe also I demonstrate an example of qiyas in Mantiq in our last lesson. Aywa. So this is what we covered in our last lesson. And then we spoke a bit about the one who established al-wadi', the one who wrote about this knowledge and expand on the pillars, and also speaks about the conditions and the branches of this knowledge. He is a Greek philosopher who is famous in the Western world, and especially his name is Aristotle. In Arabic, our scholars name him as Aristo or Aristoteles. So sometimes you find scholars mention Aristo, sometimes Aristoteles. So Al-Imam Ghazali, for example, he spoke about Aristoteles in his Tahafutul Falasifa. If you read, for example, the Muqaddimah of Tahafutul Falasifa, basically he is rebutting the works of Aristotle in metaphysics, in things that is related to God and so on and so forth. But Aristotle wrote a lot of other fields, and he wrote in medicine, he wrote in engineering and mathematics. He also wrote in logic, and that's what we are in. So if you look at Aristotle, he wrote in many fields of knowledge, and he is the teacher of Alexander the Great. If you study about the history, he is the teacher of the great conqueror Alexander the Great, and who after that period of learning of Aristotle, and he embarked on his journey, and he conquered many lands. Now, and Aristotle is the student of Plato. So here I mentioned a bit about some of his biography, and you can read up about him. You can look at the situation that he was in last time, and he was born in the year 384 BC, and BC meaning before Christ, and before the coming of Nabi Isa alayhi salam. So it's about 300 years or nearly towards 400 years. So he was born in the north of Greece, and he is considered as the father of Western philosophy. His teacher is also famous, Plato. In Arabic, our scholars name him as Aflatun. So Aflatun is Plato ibn Rushd, for example, and he wrote a lot about the works of Plato until he is famous in the West until today, where they name him as Averroes. So he wrote about Plato, he wrote about Aristotle, and this is the thing, and we find our scholars last time, they study the Greek philosophy, and because so many of these philosophies infiltrated into the minds of the Muslims during that time. So the ulama, they felt the importance of understanding them before engaging in a debate or to rebut some of the arguments that is against the Islamic creed, especially in the field of metaphysics or in the field of speaking about the existence of God. So at the age of 17 and 18, he joined Plato's academy. So Plato is a student of Socrates, which after this we show. So it is important for us to understand this history, the relationship between Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates. And Socrates is one of the main figure. He is the teacher of Plato. And the thing about Socrates is that he did not write any books, but he engaged in a lot of debates with the sophists of his time. And his student is Plato, and Plato is the one who wrote any books, and he set up this academy. And this is where Aristotle graduated before he opened up his own academy in Greece. So before Plato there is Socrates. Now this is what you call it, and so many of the So Plato was born in the year 428 BC, and he is the teacher of Aristotle. And the teacher of Plato is Socrates. He was born in the year 470 BC. And earlier I mentioned that Socrates engaged in a lot of debates with a group of people or philosophers, Greek philosophers during his time, that were known as the sophists. So the sophists are known as people who speak about certain things which are not rational. So Socrates rebutted them, and Socrates engaged in a lot of debates with them, and came out with a framework of logic to counter some of these false arguments by the sophists. So that is you see this word any Sufis and it came about in English, and we have any the term any sophisticated, because any they speak any about strange things, and they believe any in strange things, any against any the rational judgment any of a person, or against any the human any intellect. So Socrates any decided any to build any a framework where he speaks any about the importance any of thinking any rationally, and he spoke any about some any of the elements any of the knowledge any of logic. But the thing any about Socrates is that he does not compile. This is the thing. So that knowledge and is present any in him. Then came any Plato. Plato wrote any on logic and so on. But the one any who really any expanded any is Aristotle. That is why even any our Muslim any scholars any when they speak any about Mantiq any al-Wadi' any they refer any to Aristotle. Even though any Plato any came any before him, and Socrates any came any before him. Just like in Aqidah also any we speak any about Al-Imam Abul Hasan al-Ash'ari. Al-Wadi' is Al-Imam Abul Hasan al-Ash'ari, but there are people any who came before Al-Imam Abul Hasan, but they do not compile any books, but they teach knowledge. So when we speak any about Al-Wadi', yani the one who established any meaning, the one any who compiled any knowledge, and who explain any in greater details, so in which any the people any who came any after them depended any on their books. So here any we say this is the Wadi', this is any the one who established any this knowledge, and we are not any saying that this knowledge any is not present any before this person. So it may be present any before this person, or maybe he came up with something any of his own. But when it comes any to the Islamic any perspective, any Al-Imam Abul Hasan al-Ash'ari, Al-Imam Shafi and so on, they inherited any that knowledge any from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, any from the teachers to the teachers. But it's just that any they expanded any on the subject, and they wrote any their books. So what is the reason? What is the reason I mentioned Socrates? I mentioned any Plato. I mentioned Socrates. That's what I mentioned. It is important any to differentiate any between these two periods. The philosophers any until today, the Western any philosophers, they divide the period any of the early Greek any philosophy any into two periods, and they call it the pre-Socratic any period and the Aristotelian period. So meaning the philosophers any who came any before Socrates are branded any as the pre-Socratics. So if you read any on Western any philosophy and you find this particular term, they call it the pre-Socratic period. The meaning any of pre-Socratic period any is the period before the coming any of Socrates. And most any of those any philosophers any are termed any as the Sophists. So Socrates any came and rebutted any on some any of their arguments. So Socrates any is considered any to be a pioneer, which came any after him any Plato and Aristotle any who, and then came any the golden age any of the Greek any philosophy any during the time any of Aristotle. And then after the Aristotelian any period any came any the Hellenistic any age, yani after the fall any of the after the breakup any of the Greek any empire, which is led any by Alexander any the Great, and then came his commanders any after him. Then came the Hellenistic any period, and then came any the Roman any period, and so on and so forth. So it is interesting any to read up any about some any of this history, and to find any a connection any how come our early Muslim ulama, the scholars any of Islam, these works any of the Greek any philosophers any reach Baghdad any, for example, reach any the Baghdad any during the time any of the Abbasid any Caliphate, and especially under the time any of Harun al-Rashid, the Caliph any Harun al-Rashid, who established any Baitul Hikmah. And if you look at it at Baitul Hikmah, last time they refer to philosophy as wisdom. So one any of the inclination any of the early Abbasid any caliphates any is to study any the field any of philosophy, because when the Islamic empire any expanded, they are exposed any to many ideologies, and part any of these ideologies is the ideologies any of the Greeks, ideologies any of the Greeks. So they began any to translate a lot of the Greek any philosophy any from Greek any to Arabic, and from Latin any to Arabic. And then our scholars any in Aqidah any learn any about the works any of those any philosophers. So for example, before we enter into that, about the translations and in Baitul Hikmah, this is the work of Aristotle, and this work is important. And when we study any Mantiq, at least we should know what are the set of books that was written by Aristotle when he explained on the subject of Mantiq. His book is called the Organon. This is a set of 6 books that are compiled by Aristotle, and these 6 chapters or 6 books have different names. And one of the most significant books of the Organon, from the books of Organon, that came the summarized version of the Mantiq, that a lot of what we are studying today in the Islamic Mantiq, I term it Islamic Mantiq because of course there are some differences when it comes to our form of Mantiq and the Western Aristotelian logic that the Western universities are learning, because our version of Mantiq is kind of Islamicized, and as what inshallah ta'ala when we go into Sulam, you will find so many of these examples inshallah. The one of the books of the Organon is called the Categories. So it is said that the summarized version of the Categories, it give birth to the book Isaruji. This is a book that is summarized from the categories of Aristotle. Type, what is the content of the categories? So it is said that it is a text from Aristotle's Organon that enumerates all the possible kinds of things that can be the subject or the predicate of a proposition. So in this book of the categories of Aristotle, he speaks about the contents of a proposition. So this in the Islamic term, we call it the qadiyya. So you have a subject and you have a predicate. In Mantiq we call it mawdu and mahmul. So this is within the chapter of tasawwur. As what we mentioned earlier, the chapter of tasawwur, we have 2 types. We have the mabadi and we have the maqasid. When it comes into the mabadi, it is learning about kuliyatul khamsa, maqasid, and we learn about ta'rifat. And then when it comes into tasdiq, we learn about al-qadaya. Al-qadaya is made up of tasawwurat, made up of subject, made up of predicate, and then we have the thing that is binding them between the subject and the predicate. Then only we speak about affirmation, whether this particular proposition is it something that is true or false. If we say that it is true, then we have to provide evidence to strengthen our argument. We have to strengthen our premises, so that we can come with a strong conclusion through deductive argument, for example. And it is what you call it, the premises are premises that which carry truth. So Aristotle mentioned this in his book the Categories. So this is the first book of the Organon. And then we have the second one the second one is on interpretation. I hope it is clear on your side, the words. So if you look on the book of interpretation, he speaks about relationship between language and logic. See, there is a relationship, and this is interesting to me. When I study Mantiq, it has a lot a strong relation with language, because when you speak about a particular word, for example, you need to know the definition of that particular word. For example, today when we say when we say, for example, communism, this is a word, communism. So in order for us to not to make mistake in thinking, we have to come and understand the correct form of definition. How do you get the definition in a particular word? You have to go back to the language. And if you speak English, this is a term in the English language, then you go back to the definition in the English language. if we speak about as-salah in Arabic, then it is the same thing, and we have to understand what is any definition any of as-salah, the linguistic any definition, and we have any definition in terms any of the Islamic any definition. So we have any different types of definition. We have lughawiyya, we have adiyya, we have shar'iyya. The definition of the linguistic in definition in terms of custom, the definition in terms of the Sharia, the sacred law. So let me give you an example. Since I speak about as-salah, for example, and you will find this mentioned by Al-Imam Al-Haramain in his waraqat, and those of you who study any usulul fiqh, Al-Waraqat, in the first chapter of the Al-Waraqat, and he speaks about Mantiq, and basically he speaks about Mantiq. He speaks about the definition of usulul fiqh, for example, and then he gave an example of as-salah. So as-salah, lughatan, it is a dua. In the Arabic language, as-salah meaning it is a supplication. But in custom, in terms of ada, as-salah meaning what you call it, to perform any the 5 time obligatory any prayers. In terms of Sharia is al-aqwalu wal-af'alu al-muftatahatu bit-takbiri wal-mukhtatamatu bit taslim. It is words and actions that are begun by the takbir and ending by the salam, and ending by the salam. This is a definition of salah. So when a person say as-salah, then we have to get the right definition. What is meant by this particular person when you say as-salah? Does he mean any dua? Because in the Quran also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned وَصَلِّ عَلَيْهِمْ, yani make dua for them. And in the Quran also Allah said إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَمَلَائِكَتَهُ يُصَلُّونَ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes salawat upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what is the meaning of as-salawat? As-salah from Allah. So again, and we have another definition. As-salah from Allah is ar-rahmatul makunatu bit-ta'zim. It is mercy that is accompanied with glorification. But if it comes from the angels, it is istighfar. If it comes from insan, it is a-dua. So we have all these differences, and this is only pertaining to one word. Just like the word, for example, lion in the English language, it can refer to a 4-legged animal, and it also can refer to a person who is brave. So there are people, for example, they are called the lion. It doesn't mean they are lion. It means that they possess the bravery of the lion. So this comes into the metaphorical part of the language. So we have the literal part of the language. We have metaphors. So that is why when you speak about tasawwur, the understanding words, it has a relation with language. So language plays a part. Likewise, when we speak about qadiyya, proposition, there is subject and predicate. So this is also a field in grammar, where we study what is the mubtada and what is the khabar. Like in Arabic, and for example in English, and you have the subject and you have the predicate. But Arabic is more complex, and for example you have jumla ismiya, you have jumla fi'liya, you have shibhul jumla. So if you have jumla ismiya, it is a sentence that is begun by the noun. So you know that the first part, there must be a mubtada and there must be a khabar. If there is no khabar and the sentence is not complete, and it does not carry what you call it, a meaning in a sense, and we do not say it is al-kalam. In Mantiq we call it al-qadiyya. And then comes al-kadhib or al-haq, whether this particular sentence is true or not. Then we are in need of affirmations. Any affirmations requires dalil. Affirmation requires dalil. So these are some of examples. So I will not go deeply to talk about this, because this just to give you a history behind it. Later on, inshallah, you see the connection. He got about this what is called as prior analytics of deductive reasoning. In our last lesson, I gave an example of deductive argument. And deductive argument is one of the strongest form of argument, where the conclusion must be according to the premises. Just like any maths, like we say 2 plus 2, it must be 4. So this is like deductive form of reasoning is one of the strongest argument. And then we have this what is called as the posterior analytics, where he mentioned deals any demonstration, definition. Again, it's about in definition, it's about any scientific any knowledge. Distinguish any as a syllogism. Syllogism any translation any is al-qiyas. Any in our Mantiq we call it qiyas. So he explained any about the relationship any between some any of these facts, and how any it can be constructed any into profound any arguments. And then we have, number 5, the topics. So it's mentioned here is a name and given to one of Aristotle's 6 works, the Organon. The treatise and it presents in the art and the dialectic, the invention, discovery of arguments in which the proposition rests upon commonly held opinions. So this is basically a chapter and it speaks about the strength of the propositions. If the propositions are strong in its truthfulness, tamam, then the conclusion also will carry strength. And then the sophistical refutations, which he identified in 13 fallacies. So meaning the fallacies of an argument. When does an argument has mistakes, and when he has to be rectified, and so on and so forth. The nature of some of these arguments. So this is basically the Organon of Aristotle. So it is important for us to take not necessarily that you study this, or you read up everything of the Organon, but you see the thing now is there are scholars who came after Aristotle who summarized this Organon, and then came the Muslims and they further summarize. So what we have today, alhamdulillah, in the books of Mantiq in our Islamic heritage, it is summary after summary after summary, and all the main and important things were brought out, and how we can use it as a tool to study the Islamic sciences. And this is the beauty subhanallah. I personally I see this beauty of the. Then you begin to appreciate the efforts that our ulama for the past 1,300 years have put in effort to expand on this knowledge. And alhamdulillah today it is like we are served with a golden plate, this knowledge of these books of Al-Mantiq. So what we have to do now is just to study them, because all these works have been done by our ulama. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with tawfiq. So this is the name of the translator in Baitul Hikmah. So I just quoted this. Afwan, doesn't go. This is the name of the translator, which is employed by the Caliph Abu Yaqub Ishaq bin Hunayn bin Ishaq al-Abadi Hunayn or Hanin. So he was born in the year 215 Hijriya. So this is basically in the golden age of Islam during this time, during the time of Imam Shafi'i, the time of the Abbasid Caliphate, the the establishment of Baitul Hikmah. So I encourage that you read about Baitul Hikmah, and it was destroyed by the Mongols after 400 years, when the Mongols attacked Baghdad the Mongols attacked Baghdad, if I'm not mistaken, in the year 1258. Now, so that was it. And the Mongols, what they did to Baitul Hikmah is they burned the books in Baitul Hikmah, and they throw the books into the Dijla, into the rivers of Baghdad. So this is something that is done by the Mongols, that until today people cannot forget the terror of the Mongols. And they enter into Baghdad and they kill every single human being. It is mentioned that 1 million people were killed by the Mongols during the sacking of Baghdad. So that was the end of Baitul Hikmah, in the books that were written in the library. So now we continue with our Mabadi Ashara. So we spoke about Al-Had definition. We spoke about al-wadi', the one and who established any this knowledge. Now we speak any about nisbatuhu ila ghayrihi. Nisbatuhu ila ghayrihi, meaning what is any the connection any with other knowledge. So this is any important with the relationship any of other knowledges. What is the relationship any of Mantiq any to other knowledges? So this is what any our scholars any mentioned: al-umumu wal khusus, al-mutlaq, al-umumu wal khusus al-mutlaq, fahuwa yufidu al-ulum duna an yastafida min ahadiha li'anna al-aqla mustamidduhu. Taib. The ultimate any commonalities and specifications and the explains and nature of knowledges without getting any benefit any from it. It sounds any like a bit any difficult to understand, but actually what you call it does any require any some bit any of explanation. So what I will do any is I will just explain any a few things. I give examples in inshallah. Okay, now when it comes into the relationship of the knowledge and of Mantiq, it is said that the knowledge of Mantiq serve other knowledges. So this is how it is put it. The knowledge any of Mantiq, it serves any other knowledges without it attaining any benefit any from other knowledge. So it is like the foundation any of all knowledges, that all knowledges, what you call it, can be constructed any from any the knowledge any of Mantiq. So in order any for us any to understand this, so let me give you an example. And to tell you any frankly, last time any when I study any Mantiq, yani I have this any struggle any to understand any this part. So now any is the time any for me to explain inshallah ta'ala about any this notion any that is mentioned. Okay, so the example any that I will give. Now we go back any to, we start off any with the knowledge any of fiqh any, for example. We start off with the knowledge any of fiqh. So for example, we speak about prayers. Today I'm writing with my mouse, so I will have some difficulty in making it any clear. Okay, as-salatu wajibah. This is the first example. Okay, now I'm going to explain how it is related to Mantiq. You see this a simple sentence, correct or not? And this in reality is a ruling. It is a ruling in fiqh. The meaning as-salatu wajibah, yani prayers is compulsory, wajibah. And wajibah here is wajibah syar'i in terms of the sharia. Okay, now if you look in the perspective of Mantiq or logic, we say this is the subject and this is the predicate. So when you have a word, we call it within the chapter of apprehension, correct or not? Tasawwur. This is also apprehension. This part of tasawwur. What is the meaning of tasawwur? Any meaning? First thing, when you look at the subject, you have to understand what is the definition of this word, so that you do not make mistakes in thinking. So when we say as-salatu, what is the thing that enters into our mind? So in order for us not to make mistake in thinking, we have to get the definition right. So the definition as what we see in books of fiqh, al-aqwalu wal-af'alu. No need for me to write down. Al-aqwalu wal-af'alu al-muftatahatu bitakbir wal-mukhtatamatu bitaslim. So this is the definition of what is meant any by the salah here. So we are not speaking any about a salah meaning lughawi, that is dua, but we are speaking about ta'rif shar'i. This is what we are speaking about. So you do not any make the mistake any in thinking. Taib. So now once you get the definition right, now your tasawwur any is right. So the knowledge in your mantiq, it protects you any from thinking wrongly. One of the ways any is by getting the definition right. Okay, so now any you get the definition right. So this is any the first thing. And then any you look any at the mahmul, the khabar or the predicate. So it says any wajibah. Again any we are in any of definition. What is any the definition any of wajibah? So we need any to understand that this is a definition yani in the Sharia again, because here we are speaking any about the sacred law. So how do you get any the definition any of wajibah? Because in the Arabic language, wajibah any meaning compulsory, but in the sacred law we have any a different any definition. We are our scholars any of usul any, for example, any mention ma yusabu ala fi'lihi wa yu'aqabu ala tarkihi. Ma yusabu ala fi'lihi wa yu'aqabu ala tarkihi. Yani it is an action any that you will carry rewards any when you perform it, and there is punishment any if you do not any perform. Another definition also, any part any of the definition also speaks any about what you call it, command any that comes any from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bil ilzam. Yani when there is any emphasis any on the command to perform any something, this is any the meaning any of wajib. So this is when we get any the definition. Now we have the tasawwur any of the predicate. So once any you understand definition of the subject, you understand the definition any of the predicate. So now is the time any to bind these two. As-salatu wajibatun. As-salatu wajibatun. So when you bind this, and it becomes what we call it as qadiyya. Yani it becomes a proposition. It becomes any a proposition. And proposition any is part of tasawwur. Proposition any is part any of tasawwur. Then when you have come up any with this any proposition, then we are in need any to ask what is the evidence, correct or not? What is the evidence? This is any actually any the conclusion. So where is the premises? Where is any the premises? So we say the premise, the first premise, yani we say al-amru yaqtadi al-wujub. This is what we study in usulul fiqh. When you have any fi'l amr, it shows that it is wajib. Aqimus salah, it is a verse in the Quran. Aqimus salah, as-salah, aqimus salah, amr, as-salatu wajibah. What is the meaning? Yani Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it in the Quran, wa aqimus salah, wa aqimus salah. So when you look in the verse in the Quran, aqimus salah, and it is in a command form. And the scholars of usul and mention al-amru yaqtadi al-wujub, and if you have a command form, it shows that the action is wajib. It shows that the action is wajib. Yani with conditions of course. So the verse in wa aqimus salah, it is a command form. Therefore, as-salatu wajibah. Therefore, prayers is wajib. So this is any syllogism. This is an argument, an example any of an argument in what you call it in fiqh. So this comes any from the framework any of the knowledge any of Mantiq. So if you ask any, for example, what about knowledge any of aqidah any, for example, likewise, I gave an example in the last lesson. Al-alam yani mutaghayyir wa kullu al-mutaghayyir hadith, al-alam hadith. Yani everything any that change is contingent. The universe any change, the universe any is contingent. This is an example any of an argument. The kalam any cosmological argument. So this comes any from the knowledge any of Mantiq. So basically what we are trying any to say here is that the knowledge any of Mantiq can be applied any to all knowledges, because all knowledges any is made of what? Is made up any of premise, and premise any comes any from subject and predicate. So you have any the subject, you have the predicate, and you have the premise and the qadiyah, the proposition, and then we look at the truthfulness any of this premise, and then comes any the second any premise, and then comes any the conclusion, and then the conclusion can be used again as a premise, and so on and so forth. So it can be never ending. So when we speak any about the knowledge any of tasawwuf any also, what you call it, we can apply any knowledge any Mantiq any in tasawwuf. We can apply knowledge any Mantiq any in the Arabic language, in the basically any all forms any of knowledge. So this is any the nisbah. This is any the relationship any of the knowledge any of Mantiq any to the other knowledges. So now when we go on into the next one, istimdad, the knowledge any of Mantiq. How does any this knowledge any derive? So the source any is al-aql. Yani because any knowledge any of Mantiq any has what you call it, it is any it is a process any of thinking. It is a process any of thinking, that how you are able any to deduce, the evidences, to deduce any the premises, to come up any with the conclusions. So all this any is the work any of the mind. So it is the mind any that look any at arguments, look at the sources, look at evidences. So this is the meaning any of al-istimdad. And the ruling any of learning any Mantiq, yani it is permissible any to those and who have the ability to understand the Quran, the Sunnah, and fardu kifaya when there is a need to rebut false ideologies. Like nowadays we are in need any to protect any ourselves any from all false any ideologies any that is coming any to our minds, to our society, and so on and so forth. So it is fardu kifaya, meaning there must be any people any who learn any this field, so that they are able any to rebut ideologies any that are damaging any to the Muslim any mind. So it is any fardu kifaya. And the benefits any, it is the foundations of the Islamic any creed, usulul fiqh, and other knowledges any in general. So it is just any a tool. Mantiq any is just any a tool. So do not any be confused. We are not any saying any that it comes what you call it. It is work any of the mind. So that means any all knowledges what you call it comes any from the mind. No, yani it is just any telling you about how you need to what you call it construct good any arguments. Construct any good arguments, so that any you do not any make any fault any in thinking. So when we say that it is a foundation any of the aqidah or usulul fiqh, meaning it is any a tool any that what you call it any sets any the arguments any of the knowledge any of aqidah or the knowledge any of Mantiq, that are for the knowledge of usulul fiqh any and so on and so on any and so forth. So it is a tool any that arrange. This is any what is meant. And the name any is al-Mantiq, Mi'yarul Ilm, al-Nadar, al-Mizan. These are some of the names any of the knowledge any of Mantiq any within any our Islamic perspective. And then we have any the fa'idah, the benefits. The benefits is the ability So I mentioned earlier. Then the name Al-Mantiq, Mi'ar al-Ilm, Al-Nadar, Al-Mizan. Then we have the benefits, the ability to the correct way of reasoning and critics, so that we do not make mistake in thinking, as what we mentioned. And then the topics. What are the topics of the knowledge of Mantiq? So again, it is the same thing that we mentioned earlier. We speak about Kulliyatul Khamsa, the 5 universal concepts, the Mabadi, and then the Ta'rifat, the definitions, and then we learn about Al-Qadaya and also Qiyas in the chapter of affirmation. So now we enter into the Kitab Sulam Munawwaraq. The Kitab Sulam Al-Munawwaraq. The meaning of Sulam, in the Arabic language, it is a ladder. And Munawwaraq is something that is decorated. So a ladder that is decorated. And the author wrote Sulam al-Munawwaraq as learning, as for the beginners who are learning in Mantiq, so that this kitab becomes a ladder that is able to climb and to learn further in this knowledge of Al-Mantiq. So before we look at the kitab, first of all we take a look at the author of this kitab. So he is a great Imam, one of the scholars of Islam, by the name of Sheikh Abdul Rahman Al-Akhdari, and he was born in the year 920 Hijriya, that is 1514 in the Gregorian calendar, in the city of Bantius, which is located 3 kilometers away from Baskara. It is in Algeria. His family was known for their piety and knowledge. His father Muhammad al-Saghir and elder brother Ahmad al-Akhdari were both learned ulama, whom he has studied in his early days of childhood. He learned in fiqh, Arabic sciences, after memorizing in the Quran. He then studied in Constantinople, and this is after the conquest of Constantinople by Muhammad al-Fatih, because he was during that time. Arabic and sciences, memorizing in the Quran, and then he studied in the Zaytuniya University. So he's one of the graduates of the great university of Zaytuniya, in Tunisia, in present day. So if you look at the map, you can find the place where he was born, and basically in this part of Algeria. There are a lot of ulama that were born in Algeria, in Tunisia. So it is important for us also to study some of the history and how Islam came into this area. So this basically about the Imam Abdul Rahman Al-Akhdari. The thing that I'm amazed by the author is that when he wrote the Sulam, this book in Mantiq, in a poetry form, he was only 21 years old. And what he did was he summarized, or he make it into a poetry. We call this term in English versification, meaning you have a text, and then after that you constructed the text to poetry. So it is 144 lines in your poem, and it is taken from Al-Imam Al-Abahari book, which is called Al-Isaruji. So before him came a scholar from present day in Iran by the name of Al-Imam Al-Abahari. So he wrote a book that is called Al-Isaruji, and we will see the connection after this. So this particular book, Isaruji, is basically the principles of Aristotelian logic, and explains how logic could be used to support the Islamic creed and jurisprudence in terms of the evidences. And the work studied across the Muslim world as a primer on logic, and is often read in conjunction with Akhdari commentary. So this Sulam al-Munawwaraq is a result of this Isaruji of Al-Imam Al-Abahari. This is the name of Al-Imam Al-Abahari, Asiruddin Al-Mufaddal bin Umar ibn Mufaddal Al-Samarqandi Al-Abahari. So he was from a place that is Samarkand, in present day Central Asia. and he was born he passed away in the year 1265, and was Iranian philosopher, astronomer, and he was a student of Imam Fakhruddin Razi. So this is Imam al-Abhari in his book Isaruji. So the book, alhamdulillah, is printed. So what I intend to do in this class is that I explain Sulam, at the same time also explain Isaruji of al-Imam al-Abhari. So we are learning two books at one time, inshallah. It's like hitting two birds with one stone, because the contents are basically the same. So we can see some of the connections. Imam al-Akhdari, added a few things to the content. And the interesting thing that I find about the Isaruji of al-Imam al-Abhari is that it is a commentary of one of the philosophers of the Hellenistic age. And I have any difficulty in pronouncing this name, and it's a person's name, Porphyry. If I this is the name of this scholar during that time, and this is before the coming of Nabi Isa alayhi salam, after Aristotle. So he was influenced by Aristotelian logic, and the original language that he got is Isaruji is in Latin, and is translated by Thomas Ovicini. This is the person by the name of Porphyry. He was born in the city of Tyre, that is Assur, in present-day Lebanon. And you can read up about him. One of his most famous books is the book of Isaruji, which means introduction. The introduction. This is the meaning of Isaruji. Initially, I was amazed. What is this word? And it's not in Arabic, but this is what I found out. He is the author of this particular book, which became the reason of al-Imam al-Abhari summarizing the books, and then came al-Imam al-Akhdari. So this is the connection from Sulam to Isaruji of Imam al-Abhari to the Isaruji of Porphyry, and he summarizes the Organon of Aristotle. So that is why I mentioned Organon first. Then comes this particular author. So inshallah, in our next lesson, inshallah, we'll speak a bit more about this. Then we enter, inshallah ta'ala. Because of time, we will stop here. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.